Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Loreweek. I'm your host, starting late runner because having issues runner. Just driving me nuts with that. And now it's even kind of doing it off of me. Ugh. I hate it. I hate it. Let's see, random news. What do we got for random news today? Surely we have some random news, right? Random news. Anthem is crap. Sorry. What I find funniest about that is I've told a couple of my friends of my experience of going through Anthem, and their response has been, wow. Because, if you think about it, like, I guess this is some of my cynicism showing, but when the internet just bashes something over and over and over, usually that means it's wrong, in my experience. Just to be as blunt as I can about that. Every time the internet just goes at something, I'm like, yeah, okay. And I usually don't agree with their opinion. So it's actually surprising to me when I do. Not because of contrarianism, just because it's uncommon. It's not the common outcome. But, Anthem is crap. There's a new Ghost Recon coming out in October. And it's going to be called Ghost Recon Breakpoint. It stars some new guys. The main villain is the guy who was actually just added to Ghost Recon Wildlands as a free little extra mission thing you can do, which is kind of cool. I've seen some people who have talked about Ghost Recon Breakpoint and seen what they have to say about it. It sounds fun. Ghost Recon Wildlands was not a good game, per se. It wasn't a great game, I guess is more accurate. But it was good enough, and I actually rather enjoyed going through it with PAX. In fact, we basically 100%ed it. And I know what you say. What do you mean basic? Well, we never killed the Predator. So we never actually 100%ed it. That's it, though. That's the only thing we actually didn't manage, is we never killed the Predator. So, yay. There's a John Wick game that's in development right now. It's called John Wick Hex, which is that's very strange plutonium. I mean, that won't affect me at all, but that's a very strange choice. John Wick Hex is going to be a turn-based tactical game, not quite XCOM, but definitely with that mentality in mind. It looks all right. Near as I can tell, the whole point is to be as absolutely brutal as you can. In fact, when I was reminded of most when I was glancing at it was actually super hot, except without the gimmick. In other words, just straight turn-based. Be as awesome as you can be, John Wick. Ooh. For those of you who care over on EVE Online, the Triglavians are finally going to be invading in a free update to EVE Online soon. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then don't worry about it. But the summary is that the Triglavians are... they're not actually new. They're a species that's been existed in the Abyss Zone or whatever. I forget the actual name of it. And they're just over there doing their thing. And now they're like, hey, we're going to invade everywhere now. By all accounts, it's actually going to be a pretty cool event. I'm rather curious where they're going to go with it, because the developers have said many times that the narrative will be shaped by the players, because that's kind of what EVE Online is. So, we'll see. What else? City Skylines is getting a new expansion called Campus, which actually looks pretty cool, and would be the kind of thing I would buy if it came out on the Switch. To date, near as I can tell, none of the City Skylines expansions are on the Switch, which really irritates me, because it's the same problem that Civ 6 is currently having. Now, you might be thinking, Lore, it just takes a while to do that. And you're right, it does take a while to port something over to the Switch version of something. I understand that. The problem is, last I checked, we don't even have any news about that. So... Damn it, Mike Romano. Hang on. We don't even have any news about that, so I don't even know if they're going to port the expansions for Civ 6 and City Skyline to the Switch. I have no idea, although I do know that the developers for Stellaris do actually want to make a Switch version of Stellaris. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, because the developers don't decide things like that, but it is nice to know. Thank you very, very much, Mike Romano. As ever and as always, I appreciate those subs and that support. Thank you. I would rather have thought for food, personally. It'd be nice to not have to eat all that much, and I have way too much thought as is. And I could just steal other people's thoughts if I had to. If there's something you'd like to put that towards my Kurumano for a future stream, just let me know. Is that it for random news? I guess that is it. I suppose I should let you guys know that we are not doing Loreweek next week. I am, however, going to be seeing Detective Pikachu next Sunday, so a week from today. At least I think I am. That's the current plan. I literally can't even buy tickets yet because my theater's weird. But that's something I'm actually looking forward to. I also should mention, I was looking at the list of films for the rest of the year, and I've already kind of polled you guys on a couple of these, but for the rest of the year, we have Pokemon, obviously, which we are going to go ahead and do a discussion stream of. There's the Godzilla movie, there's Toy Story 4, there's Spider-Man, and there's Star Wars. Oh, and Dark Phoenix. Now, Dark Phoenix is obviously something you guys are interested in. You guys have voted for that, so we are going to go ahead and be doing that. And Spider-Man and Star Wars will obviously warrant a discussion video. I have no idea if you guys want me to do a discussion stream on Toy Story. So that's up to you guys, really. I'm ambivalent. I'm seeing it one way or the other. It's Toy Story. I just wish I could see it with my niece. But, yeah. Jedi Academy, I can do that. Hang on just a second. Let me pull that up. Actually, I have to pull that down. I'll put you down in the Vigilant Fund. Everything's better than Anthem. I mean, that's not true. Godzilla's coming out at the end of this month. Godzilla King of Monsters is the name of it. Speaking of which, some people have actually been questioning why the heck the website still hasn't been updated with the, you know, the to-be streamed things, the new games. There's actually a really good reason for that, and I feel like I've already said this before, but just to make it very clear, we are still in the phase 1 of streaming. The website will not be updated with new games, and we will not be taking new suggestions until we hit phase 2 of streaming. We still have to plow through Anthem, Enderal, The World Ends With You, Spider-Man's DLCs, Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, Hitman 2, Tales of Vesperia, and Pokemon Let's Go before we actually get to phase 2 of streaming. Now, the good news is that, near as I can tell, Dark Messiah, Spider-Man, Hitman, and Pokemon Let's Go will not be all that long. However, The World Ends With You, Tales of Vesperia, and Enderal probably will. Speaking of which, I should go ahead and tell you guys, for those of you not aware, obviously we're going to be playing Anthem after Loreweek today. Yay. And after that, we will be playing through Enderal. The goal is to finish Enderal by Friday, because I will not be streaming next Saturday or Sunday, and I don't know how long I won't be streaming, because I'm switching over the internet. So, that's a thing. What else? I guess that's it for personal... Oh, one last thing. So Tazara just mentioned this, obviously. We're basically done with pins. The last 4 of the pins have shuffled out and been mailed. I did that last Friday instead of sleeping. And so that's done. And the pin fund has been funded. The only reason it's even still up on the website is just kind of as a thank you for everyone who actually managed to make that whole thing happen. So thank you to everyone for the fact that the pin fund was funded. I still feel bad about the international thing, and I'm still standing by my statement on that. I have actually done a little additional looking into the international problem, and it is a huge problem. It's the kind of problem that companies solve. I'm not a company. So, I'm not saying there's no more pins, but I sincerely doubt anyone new will be wanting pins from this point on. Max Time says, why are we not talking about the Far From Home trailer? That should be obvious, if we're being completely blunt. But if I should also say, I really only have 2 things to say about it. Blah, and, hey, I did that. And I'm not going to give context for those, because anybody who's seen the trailer already knows what I'm talking about. But yeah, the Far From Home trailer is massively spoilery for Endgame. That's a thing, by the way. So, I actually don't have anything to say about Mysterio. Like, I really don't. He's there! It's Jake Gyllenhaal! That's all I got. The John Wick game? I mentioned that earlier, Anthony, but I don't have any thoughts on it, really. So, yay. Oh, I'm sorry, Aethel. I know what that's like. That happened to a friend of mine on Christmas, if you'll believe it. Seriously. Christmas Day. I still feel bad about that because I still think it was my fault, but it's neither here nor there. Let's talk about loot boxes. Okay. Let's start by saying that I hate loot boxes. Too strong. Let's start by saying that I vastly dislike loot boxes. DLC, microtransactions, cosmetic stuff, each of these has at least a realm of acceptability. Something where I could look at that and say, yeah, no, that's actually something that can have a positive impact, or that's something that can actually be a good thing. Under the right circumstances or with the right implementation, cool, yeah, awesome. That's not true with loot boxes, at least for me. Obviously, this is just my opinion, but I can't see any positive thing out of loot boxes. Nothing. I can see no positive aspect to loot boxes. And if you know me, you understand how strong of a statement that is, that I cannot find even a glimmer of a positive amongst the net negative of loot boxes. So, what that leaves us with is the fact that they're trying to introduce legislation to limit loot boxes. Now, the Protecting Children from Abusive Games Act, which will be provided by Senator Josh Hawley, who is a Republican representative from Missouri, who says he will be making it illegal and pushing for it so that games that are played by minors cannot include loot boxes or pay-to-win microtransactions. Now, everything is wrong with this. Because the problem here is, how do you define pay-to-win? Legally, because that's what this is. I'm not talking in reality land. Legal land. How do you legally define pay-to-win? How do you legally define a loot box? Those are the first two problems that have to be overcome. And anybody who understands the nature of how legality land works and how much it doesn't adhere to reality land probably already understands why, at the very baseline, at the very first hurdle, this law is probably not happening. It's just because they will have to legally define both of those concepts. Second point. This is a PR stunt. Let's just say that as bluntly as we can. This is someone who is actually trying to get brownie points. Now, I don't know that for 100% certainty. However, I would guess that with 99% certainty. This is someone who's like, oh man, yeah, no, I'm totally against this stuff that you are also against. Remember to vote for me and for my party. Now, it's funny you bring that up, Loner. The games played by minors thing is actually the easiest thing to define legally, because it already is defined legally. Any game that is, I guess, T for teen and under would qualify as a game played by minor. So the ESRB has already done his job for him on the legality of that part. So, super simple. Barely an inconvenience. But the rest of it? No. Then we add into it the fact that the Entertainment Software Association, which is the lobby group for video games, is already pushing against this. They are quite literally already campaigning against this. They have already announced statements, and they've already been pushing certain other senators in order to go against this bill and try to prevent it from ever actually hitting the floor. I don't even know what to say about that. I find that kind of funny in its own right. Like, I am a pretty tolerant, you can do whatever within reason kind of a guy. But again, the very fact that there's an actual campaign that's already been started within the last week to try and fight against restricting loot boxes sort of makes me feel a little sick, if I'm just being completely blunt. But then again, the lobbying situation here in the United States is awful. And that's really all I'm going to say about that. This is not Halloween. I don't want to get fully into this. But lobbying in the States is just disgusting. So let's just move on from that. So Nerdman says some people think Hawley just wants a bribe, let's call it what it is, from the gaming companies before he actually tries to kill the bill. That wouldn't surprise me. I have no idea. Again, I've already given my opinion. I think he's trying for brownie points. Because again, I'm sorry to say this, but any person who actually understands anything about how laws happen here in the States knows that that bill is not happening. At the absolute best, it might be warped beyond all reason to the point where it actually has nothing to do with its original intent and might get paperclipped onto another law and might get voted in about 5 years. This law is nothing, because that's how that works in the States. That's how law generation and law voting in, I don't know what the term is for that, happens here in the States. This is not cynicism. This is just reality. We have a massive bureaucratic process, and it is deliberate. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing is up to opinion, but it is a deliberate intent to specifically prevent laws from just happening. Now, there are ways to bypass that, and sometimes those happen, but you get the overall idea. See you around, Rax. I guess we're not going to have him for the FF7 thing. That sucks. Whatever. So, yeah, this isn't happening, is what I'm trying to say. In reality land, this is not happening. This is why I say he's just trying to get brownie points, because he could say yes, he could even champion this bill and make a big fuss about it and get real brownie points with his constituents. And it doesn't matter, because he knows it's not going to happen. But there's one other topic I have here before I wanted to move on, because obviously here in reality, this isn't happening. Do you think it should? Like, let's assume for a moment that this is a game, and you're playing, you know, your country that you're playing in your 4X political game, the United States, has just offered to have regulation making it illegal to sell loot boxes in games. Loot boxes are pay-to-win transactions in games that are sold to minors. That's the specific law, the intent. Like, imagine if you just had to spend 15 diplomacy power in EU4 or whatever to make this happen. I like Plutonia's answer. For those of you not reading chat, I think it should be legal to sell loot boxes, but you should lose your citizenship if you buy one. Or influence from Stellaris, yeah, exactly. Now, I'm going to give a controversial opinion. I think that should happen. And my reason why is because it's actually hard to explain why. Basically, it is my opinion that if you zoom the camera out on the gaming industry, if you really try to look at the whole thing as much as you can, what you see is a broken mess, right? Like, while there is a lot of good thing in gaming, and the gaming industry isn't going to crash, and it's not like gaming has gone to hell, because there are still good games. In fact, there are still good AAA games. I was actually asked that question just yesterday. Can you name the last good AAA game you've played? And I was like, yeah, of course I can. Devil May Cry 5. Bam! Because there are still good games happening. The problem is the gaming industry is a mess right now. And it is my opinion that this is, as much as I don't trust government, and I don't, I'm very open about that opinion, and as much as I don't trust the United States government, and I do still think that a massive external force to just kind of try and chop this situation off at the knees might be the kind of shock the system actually needs. Because the amount of money that is getting, let's call it what it is, wasted on this particular cycle of industry is disgusting and frankly negligent. And as Colgrim points out, what's better? The corporations or the government? Right? Because, and let me bear this down for you. Let's look at the money cycle, okay? What's actually happening with these loot boxes? So people pay, so money is removed from the, let's call it the citizenship pool, in order to go into the companies who are actually selling loot boxes, right? Phone games, PC games, console games, it's the whole thing. So a bunch of money is moved over here into that category. Now, where does the money go once it's gone there? Now, we don't know 100%, but we do know with 99% certainty that that money immediately goes into the distribution of the publishers involved, which also gets paid off into the investors involved. The publishers then recycle the money back into either their own pockets, which basically removes it from the system, because then it goes into investments, or they... I'm saying that wrong. Because then it gets into their own private pool, which is removed from the system. Or they put it into investments, which then cycles it back into the investor pool, which some of the money has already gone into. The investor pool always cycles back into the actual pool itself. Basically, the investor pool of money, if you zoom the camera out on the economics here in the States, the investor pool of money, the overwhelming majority of it, 99.9999% of that money gets cycled right back into the investor pool. That's how investments work. That's how they are intended to work. That's how financial analysts will tell you how to invest your money, is you invest, and then you take the money you make, and then you invest that, and then you take the money you make, and then you invest that, right? So that money, this is, forgive me for getting into economics, I know you hate it when I do that. But this is one of the biggest problems with the economy, is that the investor pool, it's just my own terminology for it, is just cycling into itself. An economy, by its very nature, must have money flowing constantly and consistently, creating a low-pressure atmosphere that moves from point to point throughout the system. Otherwise, you just have a whole bunch of crap boiling up at one point, and then a storm happens, to continue this weather analogy. So, the investor pool, so you see the problem, right? I know this sounds strange, but the loot box thing is literally a direct contributor to the investor pool problem. And I think I've demonstrated that. It's only 3 hops. People spend on loot boxes, goes to the publisher, goes to the investment, goes to people, goes to investment. Bam. And then it stays in investment. Not good. So, you see the problem. This is why I say that in fantasy land, it would be nice if we could just introduce this kind of legislation to just say no. Because as much as I am the investor, I like it, Rusty Tuesday, the investor pool. I've even got the outfit going. I actually know what you're talking about, Nerdman. But I don't want to get into that right now. I'm not in favor of disallowing stuff like this. Like I tend to be on the freedom side of the order versus freedom debate. But there is also a point at which you start to hit extremes, and it is my legitimate opinion that we have already hit an extreme when it comes to this situation. That we are already at the point where this has gone beyond tolerance, and it needs to be reined back in. And the corporations aren't going to do it. And as much as you or I are not spending any money on loot boxes, we don't matter for that. As horrible as that sounds, we are not the target audience, and we never were. So, yeah. In Fantasyland, I would totally be okay with someone just chopping a block in the middle of this. Chopping it off at the knee before the infection spreads. But that won't happen, and I already discussed why. So anyways, life sucks and then you die. Moving on. A really good game that has loot boxes in it? Yeah, that's easy. Mankind Divided. Yes, I know, Solaris. You guys wouldn't shut up about the fact that it was rotating the wrong way, so I mirrored it so it was rotating the right way. What do you want from me? It's either going to rotate the wrong way or it's going to be mirrored. Take your pick. So, also, another good game with loot boxes in it would be Shadow of War. Whichever the second one was. Shadow Mordor 2. A legitimately good game. Had some very serious issues. Some of the plot was frankly dumb. How do I think corporations would react if this got passed? I know exactly how they could react. I can tell you with absolute certainty how they would react. Because when a law is implemented, especially here in the States, although this is true in most countries, when a law is implemented, there's a period of time, and I forget what it's called, but it's a period of time where it's basically, this is how much time you have to adhere to the law, okay? So what they'll do is, for this period of time, they will keep doing loot boxes, and they will continue to bilk as hard as they can during this period of time. While they are constantly doing this, they will fling money at lobbyists and their own lobbying industry, the entertainment whatever association I mentioned earlier, in order to try and then get this law overturned. They will argue whatever stupid bullcrap they can think of by throwing lawyers at it, and those lawyers will try to come up with some random stupid reason to try and undo this. They will pull the literal definition of a technically. That's actually where I got that from, by the way. When I first started using the term technically, it was because of lawyers. That's what initiated that concept to me. So that's what would happen if this law actually got passed in some fashion. And what would probably happen as a consequence of that is the corporations would win, because of course they would. They have the money. And what would probably happen, and this is just at this point I'm closer to like 50% certain, but what probably happen, I think, is they would implement changes to the law. They'd be like, this is unconstitutional, or whatever argument they'd use. Let's go and come up with a new law. Okay, so this new law is going to be a little bit different, just a little bit. It's going to be varied in this way and this way and that way. And these little addendums, these little asterisks that are added to the law, would basically make it legal to keep selling loot boxes. Like, the only thing they wouldn't be... I could almost predict this. The only thing they wouldn't be able to put loot boxes in is literal Kids for Games, which, by the way, most of those don't actually have loot boxes in them. At least the ones I've seen. Because my niece actually plays several 4Kids games on my phone. I can pull them up right now. Like the entire... What's this called? Sego Mini, that's what it's called. The entire Sego Mini series. There's no loot boxes there. You know, a lot of there's several My Little Pony games on here. There's a couple Pokemon things. There's no loot boxes there. So, boom, done. Hi, Mihawk. For whatever reason, they couldn't get it overturned? I already told you what would happen, Nerdman. They would change the law to make it legal to sell it in all but most egregious circumstances, and they would keep doing it. If you mean somehow in some magical fantasy land where a unicorn pops up and says, "No, Wilbur," then what would happen is they would probably go ahead and find some other thing to try and milk or aggressively approach in order to try and rip money out of people. Because that's what has happened every single other time this has come up over the last 20 years. Excuse me, 30 years. It's not lawyers' fault. You know, I actually don't agree with that, but I don't want to get into politics. All I'm going to say is that I actually think that lawyers are one of the biggest problems with life, and move on. Not the people, the concept. So, moving on. How many of you saw this bullet point and laughed? I'm just curious. I'm actually curious. They got rid of all the lawyers. I'm going to read something for you. There's nothing like the desert to make people feel small and insignificant. In every direction, huge dunes roll across the landscape, and an even bigger sky looms above. The oasis of Virathil is a motley collection of sun-bleached tents in the vast Anarok desert. Nothing beats the desert to make people feel small and unimportant. In every direction, enormous dunes roll across the landscape, and an even larger empty air skies above it. The oasis on the borders between Cyrodiil and Elsewhere is a colorful collection of sun-drenched tents in the vast desert of Elsewhere. That's pathetic. On the off chance you don't know what I'm talking about, the former is an actual official D&D module called the Black Roads. The latter is an official Elder Scrolls module called Elsewhere, or Elsewheres. Whoever... Bethesda put their label on this, so I'm going to call it them, but I don't actually know who's behind this. Bethesda straight up plagiarized an official D&D module. What? What? Now this is beyond words as far as I'm concerned. This is why I say Bethesda is insane, because this is actually insane. That they actually thought that people would notice this, which people did notice very, very quickly. And as I just tried to indicate, the variances between the two are virtually non-existent. The sentence structure is the same. In fact, in some cases, the sentence structure is so much the same, the the copy-replace that they did doesn't actually make sense. Who owns the Elder Scrolls? Bethesda. Well, actually, that's not true. ZeniMax owns Elder Scrolls. I don't know if anybody's above ZeniMax nowadays. I haven't looked in a while. Here's a description of a caravan the players can encounter. 4 wagons, each pulled by 2 foul-tempered camels. 1 wagon carries the caravan's food. 1 wagon carries the caravan's water and a shipment of medicinal herbs. 1 wagon carries a shipment of weapons, and 1 wagon carries the statue of Angkara. Hang on, rewind. Here's the Elsewhere caravan description. 4 carts, each pulled by 2 horses. 1 cart carries all the food. 1 cart carries all the water and medicine. 1 cart carries a load of weapons. 1 cart carries the statue. No, this is straight up plagiarism. There's no arguing this. Because one of the things I tend to say, and this is something I myself have defended in the past, is that not everything is a plagiarism copy-paste situation. A lot of similarities exist, especially in fiction, because this is 2019, and fiction's been around for a few centuries. There's nothing new under the sun, and everything is going to contain some elements of other things to some extent or another, right? However, this is insane. This is straight up plagiarism. What's funny is I've actually seen this before. I've actually seen a couple of situations. No, Hazardous. You're misunderstanding. ZeniMax is plagiarizing Wizards of the Coast. And Wizards of the Coast is a fairly large company with a pretty big legal team. I don't know who's actually going to be suing who on this, but I would be astonished if some legal action wasn't made. Bethesda's official response on the matter: no comment until both authors have had a chance to fully discuss it and understand the ramifications. Which means what they're doing is they're trying to bribe their way out of this. Let's just call it what it is. In legal terms, it's called a settlement. But it's a bribe. That's what it is. Let's just be honest about it. So they're trying to bribe their way out of this. But what I find extremely insane about this is the fact that they thought they would get away with this to begin with. And that's the thing that really has me just... Because I can't even imagine the mindset that went into this. I have tried and failed, absolutely failed to understand where they think they were going with this. And what exactly they felt like they could actually accomplish here by straight up stealing someone else's work. Oh yeah, by the way, I should mention that Hasbro owns Wizards of the Coast. Wizards of the Coast. That's a good point, because Hasbro is arguably even more litigious than Wizards of the Coast is. I'm not even kidding about that. If you look at how much Hasbro just goes after people, it's kind of it's a little bit scary. And you know the funny part is, you remember for several weeks there, every new week there was something new to talk about how insane Bethesda was being. It was mostly related to Fallout 76, but not entirely. What is going on in the minds of these people? At what point did someone in a suit decide that, yeah, just replace a few things and it'll be fine? Because someone had to give a green light to this. That's how that works. This isn't just the case of one author deciding, tee-hee-hee, I'm just going to copy replace this, and nobody will notice. Someone has to green light this kind of action. Now, I know what you're thinking, and this is actually my legitimate answer to this. This is the only way that I can think any of this makes sense, is that whatever suit was actually in charge of being ahead of this project never actually looked at it, which is what Dakota just said. He got there before me. That's the only explanation that makes any sense to me, is that whatever the actual author or authors of the Elsewhere expansion pack thing just straight up stole and thought no one would notice, and no one noticed. Which means that person is super duper fired, number one. But the best part is, because of the way legality works, that still means Bethesda, or slightly more accurately ZeniMax, is still responsible for this. Because the corporation, which is treated as a separate entity legally, put a stamp on it. This is a Bethesda product. So they are still responsible for this. I am very curious how this turns out. This is very recent. Obviously, it's just happened last week. In fact, I could pull up the date. It happened on the 8th, so that would have been last Wednesday. It doesn't work that way, Hazardous. I'm sorry. He will probably be fired. The suit in question will probably lose his job. The writer in question will almost assuredly lose his or her job. But no, what's going to happen here is they're going to bribe their way out of it, because that's the most likely thing. And that's almost funny to me, that for all of this crap, that they're just going to be out probably in the 7 or 8 digit range of money for this. And I know that sounds crazy, but when it comes to large-scale company lawsuits, Hasbro or Wizards, whoever actually decides to headline this, could easily go after them for 7 or 8 digits for this kind of thing. Because the amount of money that's usually awarded in those suits, I always have that problem, is way beyond what it actually should be in every case. Is it a bribe if they pay reparations? Yeah! Please don't sue us. Please don't sue us. Here's some money. Please don't sue us. We're going to repair all the damage. Please don't sue us. That's a bribe! I'm sorry. Let's call it what it is. By the way, what's funny is the Facebook post linking the adventure was taken down very quickly, actually. In fact, I can get a timestamp here. 1 hour, let's do some math. 1 hour and 19 minutes later, the Facebook post, which had the post was taken down, they didn't actually remove it because it was still in Bethesda's Dropbox. In fact, I believe it still is. So, good going on understanding how the internet works there. Morons. Was Bethesda always like this? I ask that sincerely. Because I don't think they were. But I don't actually know. I mean, they've done some really stupid, dumb things over the years, but I don't think I've ever actually just stared in awe as they stumble over a banana peel into a ravenous dog, which they have to run from, into an electric fence, which falls on them, causing them to fall through the ground because the ground was actually weak there, into sewage, which then sweeps them down in front of a subway train, which then knocks them in front of an explosion, and I can keep going. Because that's what's been happening here over the last year, is Bethesda's just been bam, bam, bam. This looks really weird. This is actually blue, but... oh my god, the year of hell! This has been the year of hell. What in the world? At this point, I'm actually not sure, Golbag. Although, last I checked, unless anything has changed, Bethesda still owns basically everything regarding their two. Meanwhile, Rage 2 is coming out this week. I hope it's good. Like, I'm not personally interested in it, but, you know, I do hope Rage 2 is at least good. Because one thing that's been true out of Bethesda's umbrella for the last several years is that the games that they didn't actually make have actually been pretty good. I mean, I loved Doom 4, and Doom 5 looks pretty good, and Rage 2 looks pretty good, so we'll see. Honestly, probably not, Crazy Norse, no. So, anyways, let's move on. Let's move on. What's next? So we're up to Tumblr questions. So we have quite a few here. Of course they released a roadmap. God dang it, stop ruining the term roadmap. Sorry, that's a whole other topic. I don't want to get into that. Yeah, no kidding, Adam. So yes, this is actually Nerdman's question from last week. So I figured we'd hit the Mass Effect stuff first. You know what? Hang on. In fact, I'm so going to hit the Mass Effect stuff first that I'm going to risk copy wrong. I know what you're thinking. Laura, you're just exaggerating. No, actually, I have been copy wrong for Mass Effect music before. But I don't care that much. Yes, Colgrim. Where's the question? Here it is. So, we are going to do a merger rewrite of Mass Effect that includes the wizarding world of Harry Potter. Assuming this is the wizarding world centuries after the end of the books. Now, Nerdman didn't clarify this because he's insane, evil, and crazy. However, what I'm thinking here... I mean, it'd be a great way to go, Golvig. It'd be my most popular stream I've ever done. There's two ways we could look at this. Either we do what we did with Transformers, which is basically rewrite Harry Potter, rewrite Mass Effect, and then put two together. Or we could say that Mass Effect is Harry Potter. Basically, that this is the Harry Potter setting, and once the wizards went to space, and humanity went to space, they had the incident with the Mars thing, and the First Contact War, and, you know, all of that would be a thing. I'm not sure which is more interesting, because... well, to be perfectly blunt, because the story approach to both would be completely different. I don't agree with that, Tazara. I would get more views on that than anything else. Now, Takoida brings up an interesting point. I'm going to mention something that most fictional settings don't even touch on. Because in most fictional settings, magic's universal. However, one of the things I've always liked the idea of is magic is dependent on terrain. Let me use an example that is in ignorance, so this might actually not be true. But it is my understanding that the nature of magic in Warhammer is dependent on the winds, right? Which emanate from certain points in the world. So hypothetically, a mage from Warhammer, if you just took them and pulled them into another solar system, their magic either wouldn't work at all, or it wouldn't work the same way, or it would work at a much weaker level, because they're so disconnected from the source of the magic, right? To me, that just makes a degree of sense. In fact, within the extant, there is kind of a universal magic, but it's actually pretty weak, overall speaking. It's one of the reasons most of the magic is actually quite low tier. If you want to get high-level mages, you have to go to terrain, like on Primus. Primus actually has 9 now, very powerful ley lines pumping through it. So that's why anyone on Primus can be a mage, because there's so much magic power to pull from at all times. Make sense? Which brings us to Harry Potter. I actually, admittedly, kind of like the idea that Harry Potter's magic is dependent on something on Earth. Now, if we assume this postulate, let us then presume that whatever this power is that's on Earth can't really be transported, but it also exists at certain other places in the galaxy. In other words, it basically becomes a new resource of its own right. Certain wizarding communities suddenly having a vastly more interest in Planet A or Planet B, because those planets are the ones that have their own ley line or magic thing or whatever, right? Now, there would be no tactile value to that resource. It's not like, lithium or whatever, because they couldn't mine it and then use it and distribute it to the greater galaxy. But it would nevertheless be more valuable to wizards who don't want to lose their way of living, who don't want to lose what it is that makes them wizards. And thus we would basically have wizarding enclaves on entire planets or asteroids or whatever within locations throughout the galaxy that has this relevance, right? This brings me to Ezo. Because I know, 15 people said it. I wasn't ignoring it. 15 people were like, hey, just make Ezo magic. I don't like that idea. Number one, it's too easy. It's just, there's no work involved. There's no creativity involved. But number two, the reason I don't like it is because I like better the idea that Ezo was basically an attempt to replicate magic. That they found element 0, and they started experimenting with it and created the very process of biotics in order to emulate wizarding magic. Now, based on how this is presented, the idea would be that Ezo and biotic magic would be weaker in almost every case than actual wizarding magic, but you can use Ezo everywhere. Because Ezo can be transported, because biotics can be moved, right? A biotic can still cast wherever they are, but a wizard cannot. Now, of course, I just mentioned the rewrite thing next time. What do you want from me? We can't just copy-paste the two. They're incongruent. We have to rewrite. Now, Adam brings up an interesting question. Would a curse persist once a person leaves a planet? That's a very good question, actually. Because we could argue that it should. Damn it, Huthor. But we could also argue that it shouldn't. Now, we could go both ways with that. Both would make the same logical sense. Personally, I like the idea that once it's disconnected from its power source, the power of the curse would basically kind of slowly die down until it reaches the point where the curse effectively winks out of existence. But that would be a process, and the stronger the curse, the longer it lasts. That's just my thinking on that. Now, Juanta brought up something. I'll tell you another reason. So, you know me and my political world-building mind here. Another reason I would make the magic worlds relevant is because they have flu networks. They have the ability to teleport instantly between all of the magic worlds. I know, Takoida. So, the idea there would be that while obviously that it's not like a perfectly well-designed network, it's still basically an instantaneous transport method between planets, which would have a huge value to a galactic society, right? And thus we have our second point of relevance to the resource that is the worlds that allow magic, that have the magic pulse on it or whatever. Now, a boring brings up a good question. This is actually something we should have mentioned right off the bat. Are wizards secret or are wizards open? Now, I have been automatically assuming that wizards were open, because to me there's just no way the wizards could keep this quiet in a galactic society. However, that is something we should think about. Because it would be relatively easy to say that the wizards are their own interconnected galactic power that nobody really knows about, or very few people know about. Remember that in actual Harry Potter, the minister, the Prime Minister, there we go, of Britain, was actually, of the United Kingdom, was actually aware of the wizarding world and was kept abreast. There's actually a line in one of the books, I forget which, where the Minister of Magic has to go report to the Prime Minister. So it would then be logical if, the Council, for example, or certain particularly powerful and influential organizations like Cerberus and the Elusive Man would be aware of the wizards and would actually be kept abreast of their affairs. But for the most part, again, keeping the two segregated. So that is theoretically possible. I'm not sure which I prefer. Book 7, there you go. I haven't read the book since they came out. But I have a weird memory, as we've talked about before. Oh my god, Rusty Cheese Knife, that's horrible. Not the sport mall portion of the person thing, the underwear thing. Is it book 6? I don't know. Again, I don't know. Yeah, the other minister. I'm very torn now. Which would you guys think would be better? Hidden and connected, or open? Because again, as I was saying earlier, open was just what I was automatically presuming. But I think if they had, like, I could actually picture a situation. Good morning, Bragwin. Welcome to Geek Discussion 101. I'm your host, Lore Professor. Professor Lore? Professor Runner? And we're discussing Harry Potter and Mass Effect. I do have to admit, the more I think about it, the more I like the idea of it being hidden and connected. Now, as Rusty Cheese Knife points out, that would almost assuredly make it so that certain the wizards would be in the minority, and that makes sense. If there's... Hang on, where's the D20? Oh, I put it away. If there are... Okay, let's try that again. God, my dice. Here we go. If there are 15 worlds in the galaxy that have this magic pulse on it, that allow wizards to exist on it, that is an overwhelming minority to colonizable worlds or other worlds or territories or whatever, right? That's not even a drop in the bucket. So even if the 15 worlds all had the pulse on them, and each one of them was populated entirely by wizards, it would be an incredibly minuscule amount of the population, right? Now, let's move on from that, because honestly, I can't decide. No, we're playing Anthem after Loreweek. Every Sunday morning, I do this whole talk show thing here. Well, why wouldn't they, Hudor? I could just buy them. Would there be alien wizards? So I had an idea about that. I like the idea that, let's say certain beings have something about them. I know you hate rules, Huthor. Something about them that makes it so that they could become a wizard, so that they can use magic. And in so doing, that would hypothetically mean that anyone, galactically speaking, who had the gift, who was exposed to a pulse, could then be capable of casting magic. So yeah, hypothetically, and if we were to presume this, damn it, a boring, then we could say that yes, there could be Turian, Asari, I can't think of their names. Those guys as wizards and witches. I think that is something that at least would be hypothetically possible. And I do like that idea, if I'm being honest. I wouldn't want to keep it human-centric. Now, Vorcha, that's them, Vorcha. So let's talk about the Reapers. Because if we're going to talk about Mass Effect, we have to address the Reapers. So what the hell are the Reapers in this setting? Like, do we just keep them as is? Do we try to adjust how they function? I do have a thought on this, but I'm curious what you guys think. As ever. Wow. Sorry. Tachanka is one of the Pulse worlds. That's horrible. Death Eaters riding Reapers. I mean, there's a terminology connection there that I'm totally with. Not that I'm aware of, Mike Romano. Damn it, I've already run through this song twice. Hang on. Let me pull up another song. This works. So I've seen a couple ideas there. Reapers have limited vulnerability to magic. The Reapers are magical golems. The Reapers created Ezo to ensure synthetic magic. The idea I had was that magic is something relatively new. That magic is something that basically hasn't been in the setting yet. And thus is basically a built-in excuse for why this cycle can defeat the Reapers. Now, I kind of like Takoda's idea that they're not really vulnerable to magic, but I also like the idea that magic gives them, let's call it a non-literal advantage, a tactical advantage over the Reapers. Oh, and of course, Shepard's a wizard, right? Obviously. Yeah, exactly. Magic makes the Star Kid go, Except the Star Kid doesn't exist, as we know. Yeah, I like the idea that the Reapers basically can't process magic. Like, it's not like they're weak to it. It's not like they fall apart when you cast at them. But they don't really understand it, and they can't really adjust to it or adapt to it. So they just try to brute force it, and, I mean, the very nature of Harry Potter magic is the opposite of brute force. So they can't, in other words. Now, this, again, doesn't give humanity or I guess I'd say the sentient, the biological races, the win, right? It doesn't give them the ability to just crush the Reapers, because remember, by our own rules, magic is only confined to the Pulse Worlds. And so now we could have, actually, the beginnings of a strategy in Mass Effect 3. Like, imagine if the campaign literally drifted into basically a Paragon path and a Renegade path. You know what the Renegade path would be is everyone basically pulls out of everything else that they can and just holes up around the Pulse Worlds. And those become fortresses and bastions, either to withstand the assault and outlast it, or to try and lure the Reapers in to crush them. Now, you're saying, why would that be Renegade? Well, because that would involve leaving a lot of people behind to die. I probably wouldn't, Nerdman. I would absolutely reference them, but I don't think I would actually have any of them active. Now, I'm not sure what the Paragon path would be there. Because, again, yes, it would absolutely be possible to win the game on that path, I think. Either, what I'm envisioning is 4 total branches, 2 Paragon, 2 Renegade. There's one Renegade where you basically just hole up and outlast them, and the Reapers eventually give up and go back into hibernation, and you did it. Now you have to go reclaim and rebuild a destroyed galaxy. Option 2, this would be the Golden Renegade ending, you know, the one that's really hard to get, would involve some way, and I don't know what, I haven't thought of this, but some way to basically lure the primary Reaper fleet into a Pulse World or a Pulse location, and then, you know, big final battle, and then you actually destroy the Reapers for good. The only thing that I'm tripping up here is I don't know how the 2 Paragon paths would really turn out. I'd have to think about that. Probably, Adam. I actually like that idea, Kira. It is Renegade, I agree, Nicholas. That is basically a Malachor 5. You know what? That's not a bad point, Savicom. So I'm gonna go with that. I know, right, Dakota? So that's why you notice I'm just inventing my own rules for this, because they didn't. I like the idea that the Paragon Golden path is to just do what we all already expected Mass Effect 3 to be. To just unite the galaxy and, conventionally, beat back and defeat the Reapers. And I'm not sure what I think about the Paragon non-Golden Path, because there's a lot of actual directions we could take that. Actually, you know, we could include magic in that still. Because rather than trying to hole up on the Pulse Worlds, why not just use the Pulse Worlds as nexus points of resistance? Imagine for a moment how important communication is to tactics and strategy. Like, I know that sounds like a dumb thing, but hear me out. Bear with me for a second. You're on the battlefield with your troops, and you tend your troops to attack this thing, okay? The only way, let's assume that you don't have any modern gear or whatever. You're just a guy with your clothing and their guys with their clothing and their weapons, right? The only way for you to be able to direct that battle is for you to either go with your troops or to have some kind of advantage point and then be like shouting or maybe become some kind of semaphore thing, right? Now, I know that's a strange analogy, but my point is, let's assume for a moment that you have the ability to instantly be connected to all of those guys and to see what they're seeing on like a screen. So you see what they're seeing, and you hear what they're saying and what they're hearing. So all of a sudden, you have this wonderful, near-perfect communication of the situation. Your command ability is suddenly going to be vastly increased, right? I know I'm explaining something really specific or basic here, so please forgive me. But communication is hugely important to proper tactics and strategy. And you already see where I'm going with this. Make it so that magic becomes the way that the resistant forces start communicating with each other. That with that the wizards become the message runners and become the coordinators between all the different forces. Because, as Inquisitor just pointed out in chat there, the Reapers beat the Protheans by separating and dividing and conquering. That was one of the points that was made, was that the Reapers couldn't face the Protheans one-to-one, so they didn't. They chopped them off at the source, at the Citadel, and then they isolated bit by bit, right? Now, this would be, as Savacom points out, this would be probably part of the problem with that, is wizards would have to become open for this to really work. People would have to become aware of, and the secret would get out. And so you'd have to convince the wizarding world and the council races and the other leadership that this is too important to not let this slide. The wizarding world, it's going to fundamentally change the galaxy going forward, because the wizards are going to be out in the open, but we need to do this to beat back the Reapers. I also like that idea, Takota. So that would be a nice way to do like a middle branch or something. Or a fifth branch. We can have 5 endings. I'm cool with that. 16 endings. That works for me. So Mega says, what about indoctrination? Someone earlier mentioned the idea that I really like. I already said that, Nerdman. That's already established. Yes. You can. They have their own teleport hub. I like the idea that indoctrination can be cured by magic. I like that idea. That with proper charms and, magic, because there's so much wizarding magic that affects the mind, it makes sense to me that you could fundamentally alter the indoctrination to effectively remove it from the equation. I like that idea a lot, because it's not a pure cure for indoctrination, because it's not the kind of thing you could just distribute and everyone's free, but it is a cure at all, something that you can then have to try and verify. Okay, are you indoctrinated? Are you indoctrinated? Shrug, Kira. That's my answer to that. I mean, honestly, the only canon answer we have for that is that the leadership, the positions of leadership of the Mundanes are helping to maintain the Masquerade. That's the only explanation we ever really got for that. How would the Geth fit in? So someone earlier mentioned the idea that the Quarian world was a pulse world, which I kind of like, actually, because it would be another thing that the Quarians would no longer have access to, is magic. But I also happen to like the idea that the Geth were something that the Quarians, who were all, you know, open about their wizarding, where they didn't have a masquerade. The Geth were just them doing what they could to try and... let me rewind this for a second. You know one of the things that's the most common trait of wizards, other than arrogance, in Harry Potter? Laziness. I'm serious, think about it. They basically refuse to develop because they just use magic for everything. I kind of like the idea that the Geth were basically just made in a sort of lazy ignorance. Like, okay, here we go. Just serve us. Do we have a soul? Do you have... What? Oh, God. That's true, Kira. That's also true, Blackfile. Wizards are super racist. That's another one. They're super biased. They're super lazy. They're dumb. Anyways. Now that's an interesting idea, Kira. The only reason I don't like the Geth being a magical race is because by our own rules we've established that means the Geth could only ever be around pulse worlds. Now, that would fit for the main Geth fleet, which, if you're paying attention to Mass Effect lore, is always in orbit of Rannoch, right? That they've just been there ever since. But there's a lot of other Geth. But most of the other Geth we fight in Mass Effect 1 are Reaper Geth, Reaper-indoctrinated Geth. So what if the Reapers and their Ezotech have the ability to effectively, let's kind of say, jury-rig a Geth, so that a Geth can function on Ezo rather than magic? And that goes back to what someone earlier was saying about the idea of maybe Ezo was a Reaper invention to artificially kind of go in the magic direction. Yeah, like Blood Elves on Fel. That's actually not a bad parallel. So that would be the Heretic Geth, then. So that actually fits, now that I think about it. It does still mean the true Geth would still be limited to Pulse Worlds, but it would also add another little interesting wriggle to Legion's mission in Mass Effect 2, because it would no longer be reprogram them or kill them. It would be, if we allow this variable to exist, then Geth can leave Pulse Worlds. They can be free to explore the galaxy. But if we remove this variable, all the Geth not at a Pulse World are going to fall out and die. And I kind of like that. Is there an afterlife in HP? That's a good frickin' question. Probably. I don't know. How do I think the Wizards would deal with the Reapers? La 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 la. Up, and we will serve the Reapers. That's how I think they would deal with them. I'm not kidding. If the Wizarding world was had to deal with the Reapers by themselves, they would just be like, "There's nothing happening. There's nothing happening. Woo, there's nothing happening," and then they would all die. That would be what would happen. You asked that earlier, Adam. I don't think so. I think that Cerberus would obviously be aware of the Wizarding World. Absolutely, the Elusive Man would be aware of the Wizarding World. I also kind of like the idea that one of the wizards... Basically, we'd have to make at least one character in Mass Effect 2 who is a wizard. At least one. Bare minimum. But I also have to... Yeah, no kidding, Savicom. They do a great ostrich impression. That's a good way to put that. But I do think Cerberus would basically, instead of being anti-Death Eater, I think that it would be more accurate to say that Cerberus is pro... God, I'm trying to think how to phrase this. Because I don't want to say pro-Death Eater, because that's not quite true. It'd be more like pro-racist, bigoted wizards. Because I like the idea that some of the wizards, like at least one wizarding organization, they wouldn't be Death Eaters, Voldemort's long gone. But, you know, some organization is still very, you know, purity of line, you know. And instead of being purity of magic, they would be purity of species. They would be pro-humanity. And they would be anti-alien wizards. And I kind of like the idea that Cerberus would kind of be backing that crowd. And don't tell me that that crowd doesn't exist, ignoring the obvious fact that real-life humans are incredibly leaning towards that kind of line mentality to begin with. I mean, there's a reason Grindelwald was able to convince so many people to his side. Right? I mean, Voldemort just brute forced his way there, because Voldemort had no subtlety or style to him. That's part of his point. Grindelwald was conniving. It's actually one of the reasons I like him more as a villain, to be completely blunt. So I like the idea that Cerberus might actually even be behind or backing, or the ones who kind of pushed this organization into existence. You know, human wizards or something. I don't know. They'd have some kind of slogan, right? And there would be an organization or a flag or a symbol that they all flock to. Keep wizards to humanity, that kind of a thing. I like the idea that it's new, Mega, and thus Javik had never actually encountered magic. I know, Rusty Cheese Knife. Yeah, Voldemort literally wasn't a pureblood, which I always find... I mean, that's the point. It's literally a point of the story, but let's be honest, that was just done because he was basically a Hitler allegory. I agree, Max Time, completely. By the way, it's good to see you here. I know you were in lurk status, but it's always nice to see you. I was going to comment on something. So Jaluda mentions maybe the Elusive Man is a wizard. I actually kind of like that idea, because that could be something of a thing. Because the Elusive Man is just hanging out, not at a pulse world, right? So there's nothing to indicate that he is, in fact, a wizard. But I like the idea that one way or another, you end up interacting with him either as an antagonist or actually trying to help him or working with him. And he reveals that he's actually a damned good wizard. And you know why I like that? Because of Hermione. Hear me out. Hermione's... Actually, Snape falls into the same category, if we're being honest, but Hermione was smart. She didn't just coast by on skill, like several wizards do. She actually thought it through, and could cast extremely powerful, extremely complex spells because she was smart. Because she had the mental discipline and precision to be very good at magic, and that's always made sense to me. Thus, I like the idea that the Elusive Man is the same concept, that he is so precise and honed and disciplined and mentally strong that he has the capacity to be a very powerful wizard. Thank you very, very much, Silence J23. As ever, and as always, I do appreciate those subs and your support. Thank you. Now, if there's any future streams you'd like to put that towards, I've got a whole list on my website. Just let me know. I'll jot that down. That's the idea. Like, imagine if the Elusive Man is relatively weaker in power level, but is absolutely brilliant in what he does with it. Basically, making him extremely skilled. Now, Mega asked an interesting question. If you destroy a pulse world, would magic die or would it disperse? The world builder in me says that it would disperse to the point of irrelevance. Imagine for a moment that if you took a ball of helium and let it go into space, right? Like, within a fairly short period of... It's also assumed it's also expanding. It's like exploded out. Within an extremely short period of time, that helium would be so distributed to the point of practically nonsense, right? It would be irrelevant. So I think that it would distribute and then eventually get to the point of not being capable of being even detected. It's effectively gone at that point. So any world, any pulse world that's destroyed would therefore be a very large-scale, permanent loss. And the only way to bypass that would be the kind of tech and knowledge and magic that's basically beyond what we're talking about here. That's true, Takoida. That's true. How would Lupin fit in? Well, I mean, obviously he wouldn't be there, but Any werewolves? I don't know, honestly. Because that's actually true. We haven't really talked about the magic monsters yet, because there's so many magical beasts and magical monsters. I don't even know how that would be possible, Adam. How does magic gather into a pulse world? Quantum. Wait, Huthor says I don't explain it. I have to explain it now. And I already have an answer. What was the name of the Prothean AI left for the Asari? You probably already see where I'm going with this. I like the idea that magic, whatever the energy is that allows for magic, has always been in the galaxy. Was it Vigil? No, it wasn't Vigil. Alexa. Was it Victory? God, it's been a while. You know what hasn't been a while for, though, is Tokyo Vampire, because Tokyo Vampire is awesome. Vampire, Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Thank you very, very much, Tokyo Vampire. As ever and as always. Much appreciate. Thank you. Was it Victory? It was Veronica. Whatever. You know who I'm talking about, right? The AI that is responsible for the Asari's dominance of the galactic stage. That's what I'm referring to. I like the idea that that AI was either part of a rogue Prothean operation or a last-ditch desperate Prothean operation. Hear me out. That they had effectively, in the waning years of their life, basically come up with a hypothesis that the extremely loose particles throughout the galaxy could actually be condensed and to be cohesed into what could be considered magic, and thus become the pulse world. But the only way that could happen is if you had an absolutely ludicrous amount of time, say like 50,000 years. You see where I'm going with this? So the idea is that while the Asari were doing their thing, they were also basically slowly gathering as they traveled the galaxy all of the necessary energy into one cohesive ball. And then that energy would be pushed into specific planets, thus creating a pulse world. Now, I also admit, in this circumstance, Earth was probably a fluke. But we could also explain it as the fact that the Protheans chose Earth to be the first pulse world, as a proof of concept. And I can say that further easily because, as we already know from Mass Effect lore, the Protheans were aware of Earth a really long time ago, back when the Protheans were still out and about. So it's entirely reasonable that they had chosen that planet and said, that one, as their first test ground. And if the proto-humanity was wiped out, whatever. Hello, Sonoshi. Hello, Legion Reaper. So there you go, Huthor. I explained it. Sorry. But I like that because, A, as Takoida points out, it would explain why human magic didn't really follow any rules. Why, we've been describing how magic works here, and it's far more cohesive. But Earth magic, the Harry Potter magic, is just all over the place. Well, that's because it was the prototype. It's because they were desperate and in a hurry with the Reapers breathing down their throats, and they're like, "Ugh, make this happen." But then once it worked, they started doing this for other worlds bit by bit. This could also explain why the number of worlds that are pulse worlds are so small, because this would take such an arduously huge amount of time, literally in the millennia range, right? To gather random particles in space. Like, you can't just grid that, We've been talking for like 40 minutes about this. Every time we bring up Mass Effect. What's funny is the next question is also Mass Effect related. I might actually skip it, because I don't want to Mass Effect overdose. Magic Point 4. So it's the anthem of magic! That could be true too, Takoida. We could make each of the council races Homeworlds, pulse worlds. That's an interesting idea, because that would also then engender a natural reason why the Reapers would be so interested in going after the capital worlds, other than the fact that they're the capital worlds. So, oh god, I can't think of it all of a sudden. The name of the Isari world, Palaven, Tachanka, Rannoch. I know Rannoch isn't part of that. Earth. And Solarianville. I mean, we kind of did, Uthor. It's energy. It's an energy. Thessia, that's what I was thinking of. Thessia. Alright, just to spare you guys, we'll skip the next Mass Effect question. State-sponsored magic. I mean, that makes sense. Let's move on. Let's go ahead and move on. We've been talking about this for a while. So where's my timestamp? There we go. So the next question, I suppose I should update the current topic thing. Helps me to do these timestamp revisions. Oops, we're deleting that. We'll answer that next week. Oh, no, we won't. We'll answer that in 2 weeks. Which one is this one? This is Force Unleashed 3. There we go. So you have to make Force Unleashed 3. That's the start of this question. It has to follow the adventure of a Starkiller clone. Excuse me, of the Star... sorry. Real quick, spoiler alerts for The Force Unleashed and The Force Unleashed 2. If in the off chance you want to not be spoiled on those games, this is your chance to bow out. So, you have to follow the Starkiller clone from the second game. You can ignore the alternate universe DLC. So you don't actually kill Chewbacca. I know, Adam. God, I hate... I'm sorry, I know several people like Force Unleashed and Force Unleashed 2. I am not on that list. I have always despised the stories of those games. They're not even approaching continuity, as far as I'm concerned, as canon, or whatever you want to call it. But anyways, so you have to make a game. It has to follow through the events of Mass Effect 2, of Force Unleashed 2. It has to follow either the dark or the light ending, and this is the standard gameplay story. Feel free to go all out, no character is off limits, try to stay consistent, go. So, yes, Baron. Damn it, Cashel. Where do you go with this? His lightsaber is named Sparta! No, now, part of the reason I'm asking this here is because I got nothing. Like, I don't even have the beginning of an idea here. Where the hell do we go with Force Unleashed 3? Like, it has to happen basically before A New Hope and Empire. So... I suppose we'd also have to decide if this is in the EU or the AU. Or Legends and Canon, if you prefer the other terminology. So... I guess we'll stick with AU, because this is a new game coming out, so it'd probably be part of the AU. So in that case, that would also make The Force Unleashed canon, if we did that. Let's just rewind this and say that this is in an Elseworlds. So it's not canon in any sense. It's just a what-if story. Yes, it is, Uthor. And will be for months at this point. It's our usual approach. Especially for unrelated storytelling. So now that it's an Elseworlds... And see, it's funny you say that, Adam. Because my first thought is actually closer to what Kira says. See, the problem is Starkiller 2... is stupidly overpowered. Like, that's the point. The whole point of the game is that you're supposed to be this doomed death machine having fun with the Force, which I am in favor of, by the way, from a gameplay perspective. But story-wise, it doesn't fit anything. At least certainly not in the era that it's set in. So, what I would do, and I'm not actually kidding, is I would basically do an Elseworlds of the original trilogy. I would show what would happen if, instead of Luke, we got Starkiller. Now, that's problematic, I'll admit, from a storytelling perspective, because, let's be honest, the original trilogy is the story of Luke Skywalker. It is all about his character growth and change throughout 3 films. While there's certainly other characters, and they are certainly more interesting at certain times, and they do have their own character arcs, removing Skywalker from the equation is just kind of a... So I would have to really sit and think about exactly how I would construct this. Now... Yeah, fair, Malachor. Now, the problem is, and I think Dakota mentioned this, the problem is Palpatine, even in my he's in retirement theory, which is still a theory, Palpatine wouldn't allow that kind of a threat to exist. Darth Vader is already extremely powerful. There's no way Palpatine would allow Starkiller to keep going. He would make it his top priority to deal with Starkiller, probably personally. And I'm sorry, Palpatine would beat Starkiller. So... But he plays an evil clone, that's it! Yeah, you see why I'm having so much trouble with this. It's so hard. You're asking me to design a story around something that is almost the antithesis of storytelling. Like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to crap on the story, it's just that they don't fit, and story was never the point of the Force Unleashed series. You know what's funny is the founder of the Rebel Alliance thing is what pisses me off most about that list, Cashel. I mean, you're right. He did all the Jedi hunting, he's actually a good guy, he can still use the dark side, and he beat Vader and Palpatine, and he founded the Rebel Alliance. Okay. Sure. Yeah, so you see why I'm having issues here. Well, there was not one founder, Adam. Bail Organa and Mon Mothma and... I never know how to pronounce his name. Iblis are the ones who basically got together to found the Rebel Alliance. Hang on, Kiera just gave me a new idea. This is gonna sound really stupid. How many of you have ever played Just Cause? Because Baron mentioned this too. Hear me out. I take it back. So this is still an Elseworld story. But rather than the movies being rewritten with Starkiller, The Force Unleashed 3 takes place entirely on Coruscant. You probably already see where I'm going with this. And the whole point of the story campaign is to just wreck your way through Coruscant. And just smash factories and destroy cloning vats and just make your way through there, absolutely wrecking all of the Imperial facilities on Coruscant. Forcing Vader to come back, forcing Palpatine to come back. Yeah, pull down the Senate building. Just wrecking Coruscant. And as you cause more issues and cause more problems, basically it gets to the point where Palpatine effectively cannot avoid you anymore, or finally decides to go out and fight you personally, which has, of course, been your goal the whole time. And then you kill Palpatine. You win. The galaxy's free forever. And then there's an epilogue that plays that shows how the galaxy descended into the most horrible dark age of barbarism and violence ever because he just lopped off the head of the lead legitimate ruler of a galactic empire and everything just fell to hell with nothing to replace it. Because there's no rebellion here. There's no republic. Or New Republic, excuse me. Okay, I'm being a bit bitter with that last part. But still, I do kind of like that idea of just a pseudo-open world approach to just wrecking your way through Coruscant. Ooh, I like that, Dakota. I like that. Boba Fett's there for some reason. He's cool. He's cool. He's there because he's, you know what? I can actually tell you exactly what happens. At one scene, there's this one scene. Starkiller is walking down the corridor and he suddenly sees someone and the Boba Fett just kind of turns. Starkiller turns. And Boba Fett's like... And then they just keep walking. He doesn't even say any dialogue because Boba Fett never says anything. Nope, just on Coruscant. Ah, fair, Adam. We should make the bad ending Galactic Anarchy. Actually, that's an interesting point. So Malachor says he's a glass cannon, which I don't buy, by the way. But I do like the idea that bad ending, right? You lop off Palpatine, and then they base Delta Zero the planet. Coruscant is destroyed in order to kill Starkiller. And they succeed. And then the galaxy descends into anarchy. The end. And then Luke shows up like, no. And the good ending is, haha, that's what I'll do to save the galaxy and beat the Galactic Empire. And then Luke wakes up and like, oh man, I just had the weirdest dream. Whatever. I need to get to Tashi Station later. Pick up some power converters. Walks out. There's a Jawa sandcrawler right there. Don't do that. That's terrible. I mean, that would be a very Palpatine thing, Dakota. So I could see that. And yeah, there goes the... Oh, what do they call it? The holonet. Just... Of course, Adam. Why wouldn't they? They're led by Tarkin, who is stupid and evil. And Tarkin's like, I must kill him at any cost. Begin the base Delta Zero attack. I can't do British. I don't know where I'd go with that, Malachor, so I got nothing on that. Can we destroy the Jedi Temple? Yeah, okay, sure. Just for fun. Isn't the Jedi Temple already destroyed at that point in history? No, it's not the Jedi Temple. I mean, it used to be, but it's the same building. He's just using it for something else, and that's why you destroy it. Not because you want to destroy the Jedi Temple, but because Palpatine has repurposed it to the Inquisitor's school of whatever. And so... Oh yeah, Palpatine the whole time would be like... So, if you've played Just Cause 3... You get these audio logs constantly from the leader, and it's basically him narrating his path to power. It's one of the most brilliant aspects of the story of Just Cause 3, believe it or not. And so, I like the idea of something similar, except rather than an audio log, it's literally Palpatine talking to us, reaching out like, you know, if you continue down this path, blah, 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 I could offer you riches and power if you were to join me. All that you have destroyed is replaceable, but you are not. You are special. You know, just trying to lure you over. No, we're super not taking this seriously. I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer this question seriously. I don't like the Force Unleashed story. I'm sorry. You just asked me to rewrite the story of Ride to Hell Retribution, which I've done. It wasn't a very serious story. I tried to make it make sense, but it wasn't very serious. Tarkin fires the Death Star, and so you have no, it's a quick time event, and so you have to be like, and it's like an 8-frame window, very tight, and then there we go, and you deflect the Death Star laser right back up. Yeah, okay. Actually, you know what I like the idea of? Let's go Breath of the Wild with this. So you could take down the infrastructure and basically make the final battles easier. You know, debuff Palpatine, remove the amount of troops and turrets he has, increase your own power. Or, the moment you leave the plateau, you could just go and fight Palpatine, like right at the beginning. It would be super hard, but you could do it. I've actually never read the books, so I can't comment on those, Malachor. I mean, after the game, I was like, nah, so... KOTOR 3, The Force Unleashed. Oh my gosh. That's all I got. I don't know where else to go with this. I like the Just Cause idea. Moving on. Although, you know what, Malachor, if you don't mind, even though I'm moving on to the next story point, I'd really like it if you would give me your idea. Like, what would you do with it? Where would you go with it? Since you're more familiar with the story than I am. Time travel police, right. God, I hope not, Adam. I'm sorry, one of the biggest things I dislike about Force Unleashed is the scale of power that he has is just stupid. Time Cops! You remember Time Cops, right? God, I hated that movie. Although I actually liked the book more than I probably should have. Whoops. Damn it, come on. Perfect, little Billy. No, I'm not talking about any of that. What I'm talking about, so I'm going to ask this question in a vacuum, because this is actually a spoiler question. But the core question is something I was interested in. So, it was either that or delete the question. So this is what we're doing with this. So assume for a moment that Type 3 time travel... Let me put it this way. Let's assume that you exist within a setting where Type 2 and Type 3 time travel both exist. Now, as a quick refresher, that is Type 2 is an alterable timeline, one timeline, and Type 3 is multiple timeline branches. Now, the idea here is the point of the story is you're playing these time cops whose job it is to prevent Type 3 from ever happening. So anytime there's any alterations to the timeline, their job is to try and unalter it. To the point where it may change the existing timeline, but it doesn't create any new branches. So that's the whole premise, is they have to go back and try to prevent Type 3 from existing. Now, this only... Anybody who knows what I'm talking about probably knows why this is technically a spoiler question. But the idea here is that a Type 3 time travel alteration will only happen if something really substantial is actually removed entirely from the equation. So in other words, all time travel you do is Type 2. So it's all just altering the timeline, unless you go back and take this dice of power from the timeline, at which point that removal of that item is what causes the new timeline to branch out. Make sense? So their job is to allow alterations while policing alterations, while preventing these from ever going anywhere. And yeah, actually, Prince of Persia was one of the things I was thinking of when it came to this overall approach. Now, the actual question here, I agree, Crazy Norse. The actual question is here, how would you write this from a moral and pragmatic stance? Oh god, you're right, Plutonia. You're absolutely right. It really would. So... this one admittedly kind of threw me for a loop, which is why I'm bringing it here, because I didn't know what to answer to this. But what I do know is that I just got a spam message. And that's very important, because it means I'm going to delete it, which I just did. Bam. Gone. Main character be suicidal. Well, actually, there's a movie I can mention in reference to that. It's an older movie, but I still like to avoid unrelated story things. God, I don't know. I got nothing. Like, I guess the best overall idea I've given here, the best overall idea I have is that the people who are doing this are so jaded and gone from a moralistic perspective that all they're thinking about is trying to prevent these things from leaving the equation. As Plutonia says, this is a massive amount of save scumming to ensure that nothing ever happens to the items that would cause a branch. By the way, for anybody who knows what I'm referencing when it comes to an item leaves, causes a branch, let me just say, roll my eyes and move on from that. I don't want to discuss it again. It's just whatever. But yeah, like Deckard and Blade Runner, just... You want a drink? Glug, glug, glug. How about a drink? Glug, glug, glug. No, I have not, Mike Romano. AI, that could work. Because an AI would only care about the results, basically. No one counts the lives we save, everyone counts the lives we kill. I actually kind of like that. Back to the Future, let's just be 100% honest about it, is very inconsistent with its own time travel rules. That's fine, it's a great series of films, and I love them. But their time travel is awful. I'm allowed to dislike things and things I love. I know that's strange. Sorry, I was just having breakfast. Glug, glug, glug. I know what you're referencing, Solaris. It's just... Back to the Future literally has... Like, imagine if time travel... I'm not going to spoil, but imagine if time travel was a person. And the person is very lazy about their job. That's time travel in Back to the Future. I'm not really saying that as an insult. It's just something we all have to kind of acknowledge. I'm slowly fading away. Why? Well, because time hasn't been altered yet to re-change things back to where they should have been, even though it's a new thing. Okay, that makes no sense! Oh god, that's horrible, Micromon. That sounds like something I've actually heard of, so maybe I have heard of that. But I haven't read it. I know I haven't read it. Anyways, enough about Back to the Future. So, like, imagine if there is a group running around with the frickin' DeLorean. And that's their goal. It's like, okay, we gotta make sure. I don't know. I got nothing. I really do have nothing. That's why I'm asking this here. I've seen a few decent ideas in chat. And now we're talking about Back to the Future. They probably would, Savicom, although I don't like unreliable narrator as a thing, personally. Like, I get its usage and purpose, but I do think some writers lean a little too heavily on it. The original world has Nazis winning. So it's Wolfenstein? See you around, Cord. They have cloaking tech and neural edge. No, I like the idea that they don't have anything fancy. They just run around. They just have a time machine and whatever tools they have at whatever point they're at. Which actually makes no sense. God. Because they could just go forward 70 trillion years and be like, alright, here's the reality alter ring. It's last year's season, so I got it on the cheap. Then they rewind back 70,000 years. Okay. And fixed. Like... Okay, hang on. I know how we can solve that problem. So their time travel can only work in two directions. Now, I know what you're saying. Well, of course it can, but hear me out. It can only go to an anchor, and then it can only return to an anchor. What that means is the only way for them to go back, to go to the future, is actually to recall to the present, to the spot where they left from. The time from that left from, you know, whatever. No, no, there's still a way around that. Because all you'd have to do is say, alright guys, we need to build another anchor 50 years from now. Okay, everyone, we're all going to agree to build an anchor in 50 years, right? Cool. And then they would just recall to the anchor 50 years from now. Yeah, no problem, spoke of. Yeah, it's the Bill and Ted rules. That's exactly what it is, yeah. I give up. I give up. They I mean, even if I introduced like a non-literal prevention, like someone says you must not do this, there's going to be at least one person who's like, I'm totally going to do this anyways, and then they do it. This is why I don't like writing time travel, by the way, and why I prefer Type 1 time travel, because Type 1 time travel actually bypasses most of these problems. It involves a lot of work and a lot of setup, but once you've done it, it's the whole point is it's a closed loop. So, you know, no Bill and Ted problems. Let's move on. I got nothing. What's our next question? Uranus. So this is another one of those I have no idea what to say about this ones. This is actually kind of an older question, but I got nothing on this one. So I'm just going to read the question in full. You have free reign with your ideas. Oh, hang on. Let me update the thing. Let's update the thing. Because I'm done. You have free reign with your ideas, but they must jump off of these guidelines. This spacefaring race's homeworld orbits its sun or suns on its axis, kind of similar to Uranus for whatever reason. They see an ultraviolet light. Everything from culture to species is fair game, go nuts. That is super how you pronounce it, Chocolate Rob. What are you talking about? This is what I like to call a blank sheet of paper question, which I always have trouble with because it's a blank sheet of paper. So it's like, I got nothing. They have their planet tilts on an axis, and they can see an ultraviolet light. That's it. Those are the only guidelines we have. I know he's asking us to create a sci-fi race, but it's a blank sheet of paper question, and I don't know what to do with blank sheet of paper questions. So I'm just going to spitball some random ideas that occurred to me. First of all, I really like the idea that if a human was to go and interact with these people, they would see everything in shades of gray. And I don't mean the stupid movie or books, and I don't mean in terms of the literal the narrative concept. I mean everything there is gray, because all of their art and culture, their clothing, everything that they have designed with regards to their ads is all on the ultraviolet spectrum, rather than on the literal light spectrum. So most of their stuff other people literally can't see. Other species literally can't see. So, first thought. No, I have not, Crazy Norse, sorry. Like Camino. Actually, yeah. Although more so, because Camino has some changes specifically for aliens. Oh, their clothes are super tacky. Wouldn't that blind them outside their own planet? Well, it's not... I mean, they're not necessarily spacefaring. In fact, we could say that they're actually really limited to space travel because of what you just said. Because of the amount of ultraviolet radiation that's just bombarding everywhere, they're basically planet-bound, even if a spacefaring community exists. We could have a pseudo-Quarian situation where they literally need specific tech in order to leave their own planet. Which actually is kind of an interesting idea. That's true. I am going the usual Star Trek route here and making these standard bipeds. Volus, you're right. Volus is closer to Quarians when you say it that way. What's interesting is if you think about it, if they were a spacefaring race, their tech would be fine. I mean, we have the ability to detect ultraviolet, right? And even though we can't physically see it, so hypothetically, their tech being able to bypass their visual limitations is really not that big of a jump. I'm not good at designing non-humanoid creatures, if I'm being completely honest. Non-humanoid sentience, I mean. I mean, in my experience, most people who design non-humanoid sentience basically take an animal and turn it into a being. And that's how that usually works. Shrug. I mean, look at the Hanar. Something Lovecraftian. No. What, you don't like it when there's a thing connecting someone's nose to their mouth, Plutonia? But otherwise they look like a normal person? And yet you can't tell me why the FTL barrier exists, Bragwin. I'm sorry. I was processing that very question, because... well, it's one of the two things in the way of the extant MP3s finally going live. It's the one question I haven't answered for myself yet. I've actually heard that same theory, Hazardous. No, Venters. Although you do amuse me. Yeah, what I'm missing right now is I need to decide what the FTL barrier actually is. Or rather, I need to understand what the FTL barrier actually is. And it does not have to be a gas giant, no. That wasn't actually part of it. It was just referencing Uranus with regards to the axis. And I need to figure out how to get MP3s to you guys, which is actually a weirdly hard problem. So I'm still debating how to actually make that happen. That's true. Underwater fire is actually a real thing. Fire. I mean, hells, have you ever used an underwater flare? Because we have that now. I don't actually know what you're referencing, Savicom. What is posted on Patreon that you download? I could post it on Discord. That's easy. That just makes people have to log into the Discord to get it, which is something I actually don't want to do. I could put it up on the website in my existing thing, but that's actually going to get in the way of the music. I could put it up on the website in the CSS, the podcast, but then it's going to get in the way of the podcast. That's fair, Plutonia. Anyways, I basically got nothing on this one. I'm sorry, whoever asked this. I've just ran into a wall on this question. That's why I asked it here. Is that it? Yep, I guess we're up to the trailer analysis. Let's kill the amazing Stellaris question. By question, I mean music. I wasn't actually going to do this originally, but a lot of people asked me to, so I will. No. Gotta have a lot of stuff up right now. There it is. So, as per our usual, first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna mute it, and actually we might be able to unmute it. Let's try it. Let's see what happens if we go through this unmuted. The return draws closer.
Halt! Hands up!
Have fun.
I'm here for you, to help take the load off your shoulders.
So, what's our next move, boss?
That's easy enough.
Are you okay?
I'm fine.
Her eyes are weirdly green.
Here, this is for you.
A flower?
Can you bear to see the planet suffer? Cloud.
Dun, 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 dun. More news in June. Probably at E3, which, by the way, yes, we are covering, for anybody curious. So now let's mute it, rewind a bit. So I actually have a weirdly large amount of things to say about this, believe it or not, because I've actually already kind of gone through this. So for those of you who've already heard me talk about this in Discord, please forgive the repetition. Close. Okay, we're going to skip ahead a little bit here. Now, the first thing I want to comment on is the fact that the bricks look awesome. And I know that that's kind of become a meme amongst my show and my viewers. But as I've said many times, there's a reason I usually look to bricks when it comes to judging visual design. It's because it's something in the back there that most people don't pay attention to. And therefore, a lot of companies and a lot of developers go out of their way to not make it look good. It's in my opinion, a good litmus test, not a guaranteed, but a good litmus test for how much attention to detail people are actually giving when it comes to their graphic design. Now, speaking of which, the other thing I usually point out is this is a good stopping point, is the doodads. Now I can see just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 16 or so doodads here. Now, for those of you on the off chance you've never heard me talk about doodads, doodads are those things that you put in the background to try and make something look different from something very, very basic. So in other words, the little bit of trash in the lower left, the flyers just to the right of her, the actual piping that goes up, the framework on the piping in the upper left, the light source on the right, the vent, the wires, the nature of how the water is kind of going through the thing. Basically, yes, as Takoida says, doodads is what Blizzard calls them, and actually still calls them as of Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2. I don't know if they call it that in their WoW development cycle. But anyways, that's where I get the term from, doodads. It's everything you do to flesh out a level to make it look more real, to make it look better. Doodads are critical, I have learned, to visual design. In fact, it's something I suck at, I will freely admit. But I love looking at them, and I love acknowledging them. So first thing we see, this is visually very impressive. Now, you might say, well, it's Square. Of course it is. If I'm being completely blunt, Square is not always visually impressive. Sometimes they're flashy with no substance. This seems to be a closer approach to actual substance. So, English voice acting, yay! But this is important. English voice acting for these guys who have one line of dialogue. If you remember the actual original FF7, when they walk down, they're like, hey, stop there! And that's it. That's all they say, this little section here. So, that's good. I only point that out. I shouldn't even have to point this out, but I'm mentioning it because it does mean this is going to be fully voice acted. So that's good. Now, this is what I like to call the transition. Oh yeah, by the way, you can see the Shinra logo on their shoulders there if you feel like pointing that out. I also have to admit, I kind of like the look of the uniforms. Even though the shoulders are unnecessary and frankly could just be removed entirely, the helmets actually work for me, and I like the rest of it. It's actually fairly utilitarian without being over-designed. They just have outfits with a lot of pockets and some belts to keep it together. I'm with it. So, now I confused Rax when I was talking about this. So this is what we call the transition. Most modern ARPGs have this. Now, if you're wondering what the transition is, let me rewind for a second. Have you ever played any of the FFs up to, I guess FF10 did this? The transition is, right? However, in more modern ARPGs, there's no because there's no separate dimension. There's not effectively a load screen you do to go between the game and the combat, right? So instead, you usually have what I call these transitions, and it's usually very visible. In a lot of games, even Devil May Cry did this to some extent, where the engine, I guess I should say, the cutscene is being played fully in engine or fully in gameplay, one of the two. But in this case, this is in engine. You have no control, but it's all being rendered in engine, so that, and then the camera kind of goes back and shifts into, whoops, went a little bit too far there, shifts back into the position it's going to be in for the actual gameplay. And so with this very simple bit here, we have a good visual representation of what the transitions are going to look like and how they're going to approach that. This is very Kingdom Hearts, by the way. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the overwhelming majority of this game, it feels and looks like it's going to play a lot like Kingdom Hearts 3. For the record, I'm in favor of that. I think Kingdom Hearts 3 did the ARPG thing quite well. And yes, Barret is over there, being Barret, like you do. Don't know if he'll fight in this initial fight. It's really hard to tell, and I basically have like 5 frames here, but he's there. Then we're going to skip forward very slightly. Now, this is actually during the boss fight against the friggin' Scorpion, which they cut to several times. But I just want to point out the UI, which is, of course, minimalistic, because that's the thing. However, we can learn a few things immediately from looking at this UI. First, lower right, we have health, we have mana, we have limit, and we have unknown. I'll cover that in just a second. We also do know, I'll cover this later, we do know that this is going to be a thing where you can switch who you're controlling at any given point in time. I'll cover that in a minute. But in the lower left, we have 2 things that, again, very Kingdom Hearts 3. You've got your attack, that's just Y, or square. You've got Punisher, which is something you can set up there, or you've got the actual command menu. Again, just like in Kingdom Hearts, you can just navigate the menus on the fly if you choose to. But you can also set shortcuts. We'll talk about that in a second. So, now the fact that this menu is up while this attack is happening, this is actually kind of a bad thing in my opinion. I hope there's an option to make these toggleable or skippable. Because you know what this is? I just realized my webcam isn't up here. Whatever, nobody needs to see me. You know what this is? This is summons from FF7, 8, and 9. And I guess 10 a little bit, but mostly 7, 8, and 9. In other words, you technically still have control, but you can't actually do anything while the summon's happening. Now, FF7 was actually like that. While the summon was happening, you were just stuck there, waiting to actually take action, because you literally could not accept inputting an action. But I kind of hope, especially given how long some of these can get, that there should be an option to skip this. We'll see. These could also be cutscene attacks. I don't know. Oh yeah, by the way, I gotta admit, the first thing I noticed about this, even playing at full speed, was hair tonic over there on the right. That just made me laugh because I'm a weirdo and I played Red Dead Redemption 2. Anyways, so we see Barretting it up. There's James, or whatever his name is. There's Jesse. I've heard a lot of people complain about Jesse's look here. I don't know why. But she's just kind of being Jessie there. I actually have nothing else to say about that. I do want to mention one very minor thing here. Actually, 2 very minor things here. First of all, this is a decent look at what a non-combat section is going to look like. This is just you running forward while the timer's ticking down. We also can see the Mako in the lower left and lower right, which actually looks really cool. I like the look they've gone for it, so that's a good touch. The timer is basically a stylized take on the old timer. It's just a nice little nod, but I like pointing out little details like that. You can, for those of you who don't remember, the old timer was basically each of the images, so there was 10 images for each number, and it just cycled between which one was more visible in order to show the actual timer. Here, they've gone with the same kind of effect, just obviously with modern technology recreating the effect, so it actually looks pretty nice there. And as we can see, there are going to be pseudo-platforming sections. Now, I did want to comment on this briefly. FF7 dipped its toe into the water of platforming sections because it would have them, but most of them were basically just hit A, or that is to say, circle, at this specific spot in order to interact with this specific thing. No, Overlord. I am admittedly kind of curious if they're going to go anywhere further with this, and that's what I wanted to comment on. Because they could actually do, some kind of legitimate platforming elements to this, or they could just make it interact with and move forward. I'm not sure which is which, and I'm not sure which they're actually going for, I should say, and I'm not sure which I would prefer. So I don't mind asking you guys, which would you prefer? Would you prefer they actually try to have more platformingness, or would they prefer it's more or less in the style of the original? Now, this is our first time seeing real combat. You notice Tifa's in the party, and yet I went through this 3 or 4 times. I haven't seen so much as a hint of Tifa in this whole thing, so I have this weird feeling that Tifa isn't fully rendered yet. Once again, this is, however, demonstrating something that is important and something that a lot of people were concerned about early on. We are playing as Barret right now. In other words, we can switch our control over to Barret. That is important, because one of the things that pisses me off most about several modern Square games is that you can control one character and not the people in your party. And that just irritates the hell out of me. So, we can actually switch to Barret. Woo! Same general thing. So if you actually watch, this is not actually a good showcasing of it. We can kind of see how the HUD is going to work. We can see that it'll actually say critical over it in the numbers. None of this is new. They've been doing that style of approach to the HUD damage since I think FF10 at the very earliest. Okay, so this is actually an important screen, believe it or not. Because I want you to look in the lower left. Because in the lower left, we now see a little more of what the actual gameplay of the setup is going to look like. So again, just like Kingdom Hearts, we have the ability to shortcut, to set certain abilities, as you can see Bravers on there, or items, as you can see posters there, as shortcuts. Now, let me just go ahead and say that that's one of the things that I love most about modern Kingdom Hearts, I should say modern ARPGs, is the ability to shortcut stuff like that. It's fairly basic design. I don't have much to say about it, but I'm very happy that they're going to continue doing that here. We also see that while in this menu, we actually have the ability to switch between characters, L2 and R2 being the switch, which, again, makes a lot of sense. Now, in the lower right, this is actually something else I wanted to address. Now, I'm going to talk about the limit bar later, because it actually shows up much more clearly in a later thing. But we don't know what the blue bar is. You see, if you look under each person's name, I hope you can see it in proper resolution because I've got this in 1080 right now. If you can see, there's actually 2 blue bars under each character's name. In fact, actually, to be slightly more accurate, there's a white bar and then there's 2 blue bars. Now, those bars can load partially. In other words, they're not static. It's not 2 points. Each one of those has the ability to be filled partially or in whole. We don't know what those are, because the orange bar is the limit bar. Now, Rax has a theory on this. This is part of why I was hoping he would be for this. His theory, so you notice we just did Braver, right? It's entirely, you'll notice, however, after doing Braver, which is the attack we just did, Cloud's orange bar, which we know is the limit break bar, hasn't gone down at all. In other words, the blue bar might be basically other command actions. So, we're going to have like normal actions, blue actions, and limit actions, right? That's the theory. That's the idea, that each blue bar being filled allows you to do something other than a standard attack, and then the limits are the really big attacks. Now, I'm not sure what I think of that option. It depends on what causes the blue bar to fill and the nature of it. Now, I do have an additional theory there, but the problem is, and I have gone over this trailer with a fine-tooth comb, we never see the blue bar moving in any shot in the entire trailer. We see it at different points. We see it double full, we see it half full, we see it partially full, but we never see it move in action, and thus we cannot connect it to any actions actually happening. That's the key crutch here. I don't know what causes the blue bar to fill, and I don't know how to make it happen. I do have a theory on it, even though this theory is basically wrong, because if you'll notice, there's a white bar immediately underneath everyone's things, too. I think the white bar is the ATB bar. Hang on. Or something like the ATB bar. Now, you're probably thinking, Lore, that's insane and stupid, and you might be right, because I want you to pay attention to the white bar, and you'll notice how it's not moving at all. Oh, the white bar might be the HP bar. Okay, fine. You're right. The white bar is probably the HP bar. That would make the other white bar, the slightly yellower bar, the MP bar. Okay, never mind. We're good. So I got nothing. I have no idea what's going on with the blue bars. There's something? So then we have a bit with, I forget his name, and Barret. I like the scars. Green eyes. I'm going to pause here 1 second to say that I hate it when they do this. I forget what it's actually properly called, but what I mean is everything other than her face is blurry. And I hate that. I hate how much modern filmmakers and television and game designers lean on artificially using blur to focus your attention on something. It drives me batty. Because her face is fully in focus. Her body is not, and the background is almost unreadable because of how blurry it is. I hate that crap. Anyways, moving on. Just personal preference. The animation's pretty good. The lip syncing is actually appropriate to English for once, which is good because it just means they're using the tech that Blizzard championed back in StarCraft 2, so I'm with that. Lots of good background stuff. People walking in the background, you know, good details. It's all blurry, of course, because screw you. There's a cat back there. Cloud also looks kind of blah here. And if you notice, and I do actually have to give them credit here, Cloud should be blah for this whole section. Remember, at this point, Cloud is still pretty blah in general. He's still recovering. I hate that technique. He's still recovering from, you know, spoiler. So it makes sense that he's still kind of blah. So then we have apps. Sorry, not raps. So apps actually looks pretty good here. I thought about pulling up actual image comparisons, and then I forgot to do that because my morning was extremely busy, so I apologize that I didn't do that. But apps, this is the boss that we fight. Whoops. Oh, hey, right, because I'm doing that. Hang on. I can't do that. I forgot I'm just grabbing my browser here to make this easier. Whatever. Anyway, so Apps is the boss you fight immediately after Don Corneo's mansion, the guy who does the wave attacks. I actually think they did a really good job with him. This is a pretty good interpretation of him, and he was immediately visibly recognizable. We see Aerith is like, wah, in the background. No Tifa still, even though she should be in this scene at this point. In fact, you'll notice her bar is still there on the right. This is obviously the sewer section. In fact, that enemy right there that Cloud is dashing at right now is one of the enemies in this, the Sahagin. Now, I'm probably going to go ahead and mention something here, because you're going to make fun of me for this. But, and maybe I'm just a little bit of an FF7 geek. I don't know. But all but one of these enemies were immediately recognizable to me. So first we have Apps, duh, the boss. Then we have a Sahagin, which is that guy right there. Also a bit of a comparison on the kind of damage Barrett does versus Cloud. Then we have a Sweeper, being fought in a Shinra area like this. Again, all immediately recognizable, and I do like what they've done with the overall style and look of each of these enemies. And, just in case it wasn't confirmed, we see that Barrett can attack and take damage while still not being controlled. I'm wondering if they're going to have any kind of gambit system for them. Then we have this thing. Now, I had no idea what this thing was for quite a bit. This took me some digging, because this was not an iconic enemy for me. In fact, you can barely see it back there, as Barrett's explodinating it. But you can kind of see it like right there. It's got this praying mantis looking thing. So, again, this is that enemy, the Grash Strike, which you fight in the lower Sector 4 plate of Midgar. It's the section you go to right after the train sequence, the second train sequence. So, yeah, I was just lost for a while. Like, what the hell is that thing? Also, of course, Cloud is doing the, I forget its name, but it's one of his limit attacks there. Oh, yeah, so I should rewind a second. So let's go back to here. I mentioned I'd talk about the limit break thing. I want you to watch Barrett's limit bar, which is the yellow one. Now, as you can see there, when he got hit, it went up a noticeable little chunk. That's why I can say with reasonably high certainty that is, in fact, his limit bar. It's worth noting that's still my presumption. I'm not actually sure about that. But I do think that that is actually the limit bar, and that's what you use for the big limit attacks, whatever they are. I think you're right, Cashel, and I hope they do. Oh yeah, by the way, several people have asked, is this still episodic? Yes, by all accounts, FF7 will still be episodic. The current theory is that Midgar will be the end of Episode 1, although there's a lot of debate about that. And we're still not really 100% sure what exactly they're going to do when it comes to things like the overworld, which is actually a very curious question, because if you think about it, there's no easy answer to that for an ARPG. The bomb is about to go off, oh my gosh! And then everything's falling apart and Cloud's about to die. No. And then someone who may or may not be George Newbern says, "Hey, Cloud, what's up? I'm super awesome. I'm one of the most iconic villains in gaming history. You probably have no idea who I am at this point in time, though, because of what's been happening to your brain." Dun 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 dun. The only reason this is relevant is because, to my knowledge, there is no scene like this in FF7. I know FF7 kind of well, but I don't recall a moment where Sephiroth showed up at any point in Midgar. Like on camera. I mean, obviously, obviously there's the thing that happens in the Shinra Tower. So, flashback or whatever, but the reason this is relevant to me is because this is probably the single clearest sign that they're going to try and flesh out the story more by adding more details where there are none now. Because if you think about it, Sephiroth should have been, to some extent or another, in Cloud's mind the whole time. But we don't actually see Seph until the town after Shinra, after Midgar. I can't think of the name of the town. So they're going to kind of do that. Now, I have to admit, I kind of like that idea, because that's what I would do. Calm, thank you, that's the name of it, Calm. Because FF7's base story, let's be honest with ourselves, does need fleshing out. The catch is that it would be very easy for that to be just as bad as it could be just as good. And I don't know what it's going to be. We won't be able to know until we actually go through it. So, whatever, as they say. And then Cloud's like, "Oh my gosh, there's sweat on my nose." Da 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 da. FF7R, coming out some year. It's just the janitor. They just brought up the janitor. "Hey, what's up, dude? We need you to do this line real quick." It also opens the door up for for lack of a better term, FF7 EU, which is both good and awful. So who knows where they're going to go with that one. Anyways, that's basically it. There we go. FF7, ladies and gentlemen. Now, based on what they said, there's an extremely high chance they're going to do something about that at E3. It'd be nice for Square to actually have a good E3 for once, because they've had a bad E3 for 5 years? It's been a while since they've actually had a good E3. So it would be nice to see if they actually go somewhere with that, but I don't know. What I do know is that we are now done, so I'm going to go ahead and chop off the local recording.